Hi there, and a very warm welcome to this week's video. And this is going to be the last video of this year. And therefore, we are doing a little bit of a different style. So rather than deep dive into things, we are going to have an overview. Because I made this HDRI setup that has a flat floor to put stuff on it, mostly it's cars. And what we are going to do is going over the advantages and disadvantages of it. And then this is a giveaway in this video for everyone, not just my Patreons. So for a last time in this year, let's grab your coffee and let's jump in. Alrighty, what isn't any different from any other video I do is that we are going to look at what we are going to do today. So this is our base scene and this is how the HDRI would come in normally. Huge shout out to Polyhaven for providing those really high-res HDRIs for free. If you're interested, the link is down in the description below. So basically what I did is to reverse engineer a free Blender add-on. So there's a couple of things we need to do here. For example, plugging in the OSL script in the projection of the HDRI and then set the render layers to on. And then we can see we have objects sitting on our HDRI plane here. The only two other things we need to do is enlarge our plane, and I already prepared that. Here we go. And then you can see there's some sort of shimmer here. This is because the plane is white right now, so if we give it the HDRI instead of the white color, this will take a while. Then you can see everything looks very realistic and sitting flush on the HDRI floor here. Welcome to our fresh scene. No car here, so just a couple of cones and a material wall. And this is since this scene will be available on Patreon. I always had licensing problems with cars, so you can exchange that with your favorite car on your own. But of course, as mentioned before, since it's Christmas, the script that flattens your HDRI will be available for everyone down in the description below. Of course, the main ingredient in this whole process is the HDRI, and the more high-res the better. So I did go to Polyhaven, and thanks to those two legends here, we have this super nice HDRI of a racetrack in up to 20K. Of course, this is not going to be small and also take some resources of your Octane scene. So download what your system can handle, and we come back to our Cinema 4D scene. Back in Cinema 4D, let's prepare for a quick tip to bring in our HDRI. You can just drag and drop it to the background of our live viewer and then click Create HDRI Environment. Super convenient. It takes a while since it's rather big, but we don't need our daylight anymore, so let's delete it. And when it's loaded, you can see we have the old HDRI behavior where the floor slides through. Of course, I could have chosen to write the OSL script here with you together in this tutorial, but I think it's rather long-winded and complex. So we can do another tutorial on scripting if you're interested. Write it to me in the comments down below. So for now, we are just going to copy this script, go to our HDRI and to its nodes here, then go to the HDRI and click Projection to create a projection tag. Go to OSL projection and paste in the script here. And if we did everything right, this should be already working. Here we go. Now we have a ground plane that moves with our camera. Very nice. While we are at it, let's go over the settings that I programmed into the OSL here. While you technically can still use the rotation in the HDRI here, I have scripted an extra one here that behaves basically the same. Also, very important, since HDRIs are shot differently, the size here might vary, so you can readjust it here. For example, if you want the sphere to appear smaller, you can use bigger numbers and therefore scale up the HDRI, or use smaller numbers to make the sphere appear bigger, maybe like the original size, judging from the cones. What you can see here is a little bit of distortion. If I wiggle around the camera, you can see it better. And this is because of two things. One, the HDRI expects a horizon line. So in the directions where we can see further, we also see there's not a lot of distortion going on. And second, if I was a better programmer, I would program in sort of a fall off here, so the distortion wouldn't be as harsh. The only way to sort of mitigate that was the horizon gamma that I invented. We can basically shift up our floor plane a little bit here towards the horizon and therefore make the distortion less visible. The next in line is the horizon offset, and it's doing exactly what it says. So it offsets the horizon. Right now it creates a gap in the scene. So if I have a little bit more time to polish it, I want to wrap around the background to the foreground at the horizon line. In the final version, this should allow for mapping the horizon line to other positions than the middle of the HDRI if the HDRI varies. As of now, unfortunately, this is a broken feature, and this is because we are basically still in beta state. So hopefully my program skills and patience allows for a better version when this becomes final. Now, the direction here is pretty self-explanatory and just sets the direction of where the ground plane is. So if you're underwater, for example, you can do it the other way around. But usually this is the right way to do it because normally objects sit flush on the world here. And last but not least, probably most important is the offset. So for example, if you want to move our sphere more inside of the road here, you can do so by moving the slider here. So this is X, Y, Z, and we are moving in the Z direction right now. And you can see now we placed our sphere in the middle of the road. Of course, you should know that the resolution of the HDRI diminishes quickly towards the rim, so you should better stay near the center here. Now that we had a look at all the HDRI OSL settings and everything's working solidly, let's integrate the scene into the HDRI a little bit better. And spoiler, we are going to use render layers and Octane's internal compositing system for that. Of course, what I mean by that is creating shadows and reflections of the objects into the environment. What we need for that is a plane. So let's go and create a plane and make it rather large. So 5000 by 5000, for example, because I know that the shadow in this HDRI is very long and we need to capture all of it. Next, let's set up our render layers. This is basically dividing our scene in active and passive objects. The active objects are those we want to see, and the passive objects is what we want to have for receiving the shadows and reflections of our active objects. I made a more in-depth tutorial about this. Link, as always, is in the upper right corner. To tell Octane to separate the active from the passive objects, we need Octane object tags, and I made a small mistake and left those in there from the old scene. So let's do them anew and go by right-clicking and extensions Octane and Octane object tags. Then inside of the object layer, we need another layer ID, so let's opt for 2. To enable our render layers, let's go to the render settings and then to the render AUV groups, and there are the render layers here. So let's just turn them on and make sure the layer ID is matching with the ID of our objects, which is okay because it's 2. Our objects right now are inside of a black void. To avoid that, let's go to the Octane settings and enable the alpha channel. And this makes the objects as cutouts, which we want. And this is all we need to jump into Octane's AUV groups and layer up our image. To do so, let's close down the render settings and go into the nodes one more time, and then open the render AUVs here. If we click on that node, we need to navigate to the AUV groups here and create an input. This is a little bit of a quirk. You can see why in a second. We need to now add the environment as a background. So let's add a node, and sorry, this is cut off from your screen. You have to go to Beauty Surfaces and then to Environment. And you can see now the quirk here is that we added the environment to the slot 2 instead of slot 1. So let's make this a little bit tidy like this. Let's go one by one layer and layer up this whole shebang here. So next what we want to add is, again, sorry for the cutoff, a render layer and then layer shadows. And you can see we have the shadows here. In order to put them over the background, let's select the layer here, go to the blending modes, and instead of the physical, let's select the multiply. Here we go. Now we have our shadows. Let's do the same thing with the reflections. Add node, then cutoff, render layer, and then layer reflections on top of there. And instead of multiply, we are going with add. Here we go. And for now, this is just the diffuse reflections or the indirect light that is visible here. Now there's only one more layer to go, and you probably know which one this is. Add node and then beauty. Here we go. Now the beauty is on top. And now if we turn our camera, you can see it is almost working. We have a sort of backdrop problem here, and this is coming from our render settings. If you look closely, the keep environment tick is still ticked. So when the plane ends, we basically have the environment 2 times. And if we untick it, you can now see this is working as expected. If we turn our material ball chrome for 1 second, you can see 2 things. One, the floor that's reflecting is actually white, and it's giving off a lot of energy. And this actually comes from the fact, if we turn off our render layers for a second, that our floor is actually white. So what we need to do is map part of our HDRI to the floor as well. Let's close down the render settings for now and go to the material here that's lingering on for a longer time. Then bring in our HDRI yet again. Here we go. Make sure the gamma is set to 1 because HDRIs are linear and therefore have a gamma of 1, and connect it to the diffuse. Here we go. So what we need to do is basically assign the material to the floor and then not use the standard mapping, which is UV, but to find a mapping that is sort of similar to the mapping that we have in our background. And I am apologizing for the now following a little bit jank and beta workflow that we are going to use to match up the perspectives. I hope to find a better solution in the final version. So what I came up with for now is to change the mapping from UVW to spherical. And I know this looks horrible, but not for long. So what we can do is go to our projection and move it up here. And this is still looking horrible, but it has something to do with the inner workings of Octane and Cinema 4D. So while Cinema 4D's projection is synthetic, what Octane is seeing is UVs. And since a spherical projection is sort of curved, it needs resolution in UV space. To give it resolution, what we can do is go to the plane here and set more subdivisions in X and Y. And you can see that's looking much better now. It's still a little bit jank here, and I notice that the plane is much too large. So what we can do here is gain more resolution by scaling it down from 5000 to 2000. This should be enough to still get the shadow whole. And yes, we are okay here. Now you don't need to look too closely to see that the floor plane is not matching up with the environment. So I opt for going to the floor plane here into opacity and set the opacity to 0.5 to see both the floor plane as well as the environment, and then match those up. So let's go to our tag here again, coordinates, and then begin by turning it around so the direction actually matches up. And then we need to lower or raise it in order for the rest to sort of match up. And this is also where it is a little bit janky, because the whole matching here is not over the whole plane. As you can see, it sort of matches here in the middle and then it disaligns at the end here again. And this is because the spherical projection is not completely the same with what we have in the underlying environment projection. So obviously what makes the most sense is to match up the perspective around the objects here. It doesn't matter whether it matches back there or not, because it is the reflections that should match one-to-one later on. So let's take the sideline as a reference and try to match it up rather well. Also, it seems to be not rotated correctly, so let's actually rotate it also a little bit better. and you can see it sort of matches up much better now overall. Of course, don't look too closely, it's still a jank solution. But now, as we matched up the proximity around our objects, let's set the opacity here to 1 again, and then actually go to our render settings and enable the render layer. So now, if we look at the reflection here, everything looks rather nice. And as always, to round off things, we have a couple of bonus tips this time. The scene that's on Patreon has a little bit more of an advanced material, so not just only diffuse. What I do here is, if we turn off the render layer for 1 second, I use the HDRI to map to the metallic layer as well as the roughness layer, and therefore I get an extra reflection for my floor plane. So if we turn on the render layer yet again, and then go into our layer reflection, you can see we get some nice extra reflections here that make the outcome even more realistic. Of course, the more stuff you do like this, the more the HDRI and the floor plane has to be matched up. Also, a very nice side effect of using the render layer method, and you probably wondered why I have a cube here, so let's turn it on for now. And then also go to the render settings and turn on the photon tracing. While photon tracing is active, you can see that the cube is actually casting caustics on the track. So this is all working interactively, and this is a nice bonus that you get with this render layer method. And lastly, something I have to point out, because this is probably something I cannot work around. If you're using depth of field, this is not working with this technique. The reason for this is that whenever we are doing a depth of field effect, and then move closer here, for example, you can see that the HDRI is still perceived by the camera as infinitely far away, as it is an optical illusion that it moves with the camera in the foreground. So this is not working, unfortunately. But maybe someone smart in the audience will figure out a way. If you know how to deal with that, please contact me. And finally, what can I say? This again took longer than anticipated. So we are back at the old timing for our tutorials. I hope this was a great last video of the year to you. You liked what you saw and learned something from it. To all my followers, thank you very much for this amazing year. I wish you the best, the most fantastic Christmas, and as we say in Germany, a great slide into the new year. Of course, the people I'm also really thankful for are my Patreons. Thank you so much as well. Especially my €50 tier subscribers, Shields Augustinen, Leon Studio TV, and Sultan. Also, of course, a huge thank you for my €15 tier subscribers, Doijim. For the Thieves, Render King, Alessandro Bonchio, Alessio De Vecchi, BVR, Chris Fritchie, Christian Grajewski, Erbe Plus Academy, Eva Nilsson Tavares, Graham Bagnall, James Conkle, Joel Mackimer, John Edward, Chris Clemson, Matthew Hall, Nico Straub, Part 1 of 2, Ralf, Random Capybara, Raiko, Renato Marquez, Reshock, Reza Ansari, Shamus Johnson, Shiro 2049, Terry Wayne Ranson, and Yassin Rupp. Thank you all so very much for making it possible to produce those videos that you all enjoy. Hi there, and thanks for chiming in to the end here, or for still listening that long. Basically, this is the Get Your Special Thanks Here section. Overall, reflecting on this year, this was a bit of a strange one, and I think a lot of you felt it too. I got barely any jobs in the spring and in the autumn, only the summertime was really cramped. And as everything is getting even more expensive nowadays, I am not sure what the future brings. So with all of this uncertainty looming on the horizon, all that we can do anyway is live our day-to-days, trying to be our best selves, don't lose our humanity, and help others here and there on our way. In this regard, I wish you a very Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year, lots of success, stability, health, and all the good things for the new year. If you want to support the algorithm overlords and give me a hint that you watched this, post a Christmas tree in the comments down below. Cheers, I'm Raphael Rau, signing off for this year. Bye!